Go ahead. It's not Friday, but I'm doing something today, so I thought I'd show you something other than just talk. Seems like Friday I'm getting away from something or coming home from something or whatever. But anyways, I'm putting the steering column in this car today, and I want to show you what I've done. This is a 1960 Corvair steering box. And I put that on there. I didn't like how the 32 steering box was down here, and it was down here. It would have crisscrossed with my wishbone thing, so I just went with a 60 Corvair steering box. I've got a joint right there. I don't know how many spline it is, 36 spline or something like that. And then it has, on the end of this other joint here, it has a 3/4 inch opening for like this. That would shove down inside of there, and it welds into that. And then you pull it off at the steering box there. This little bolt here is a pinch bolt. So what I did is I took a piece of 3/4 inch round rod. I stuck it in my joint. Then I came inside the car. I put a seat in the car that I'm using. The seat's right there. I put the seat in it. I took an old steering wheel. I know it's a lot, but it's just the easy way to do it. When you got the stuff hanging around like I do, it's easy to go grab it and do it, I guess, is to try to mess something up. So down at the bottom of the firewall, that joint's there, and this piece of round rod goes in this little joint where my finger, you see my finger is down there? Ouch, hurt my finger. Anyways, that's where the round rod goes. And then I took a steering wheel, shoved it on like that. I put it down in my joint. And I welded this little piece right here, this piece of round rod. I stuck it up and through a hole there, and I welded it to a muffler clamp. That muffler clamp is a 2¼ inch, and it goes around that steering column. So what I did is I shoved this piece of round rod in there. I shoved this piece of round rod in here with this steering wheel. Then I sat in the seat, and I tacked that bar on to hold it in place. So then I took the steering wheel off. And I went and got a steering column out of a 49 Merc. I have one outdoors. And what I do is I just use what I got. I'm not using that car right now. Whatever. I cut the steering column. I want a steel steering column in it. Praise the Lord, Alex Gambino. I like steel steering columns too. I don't like that sort of stuff either, but you know. People do as they please, and I'll do as I please. That's how I feel, I guess. But anyways, that's what I want. I want a steel steering column in it. So what I've done now is I put a muffler clamp on there, and I just hung it from that little piece of steel there that I hung this with. So I know it's in place. Then what I'm going to do, or what I have done, is I've taken a piece of round rod. I've got some round rod here. Where I put that piece of round rod? I got the round rod here, and I bring it down. I weld it to the dash, and I bring it down. And I weld it on the side of this muffler clamp to come out to the edge of this. So now I got another piece here. I got a little bend in it there because it goes back like this, then up. And then I just stick it in on the side of this muffler clamp, and I stick it in there, and I put my thumb at the top. See if I got the nice gap in there. Like, see this piece right here, when I take this little bar out here that's just holding the column, when I take that out, I can put a nice gauge in there. I can put some holes in there. That's whatever you want to do. If you know, whatever you want to do. This is just what I'm doing. But I'm going to take that piece of round rod and just hold my thumb like that. Then I know where I'm going to cut it. I'll come in there and weld that on the side of that muffler clamp on this side and run it up there. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to cut this little piece out here because that's just a hanger to hang it in place, so it's right where I want it. That's where I want it because I did all the things. And when I made the steering column here, I measured this piece. And then I measured the shaft and the steering column. The shaft and the steering column looks exactly the same as this, but hollow. On the end here, on the top here, it has a nut and a teeth or a cotter pin. You just pull that off when you put your steering column back on. I already had that measurement because I used a different steering wheel and had that on there, so I knew the length that I needed. So when I took the steering column out, I cut that shaft exactly as long as this one, because this one worked on the steering wheel. And it was long enough. So that's exactly what I did. I just cut it. This shaft, the same length as this. The shaft that goes around it, there's a bearing on the top, and there's supposed to be a bearing on the bottom. When you cut it off, there's not a bearing on the bottom anymore. So what I have done is I took the shaft out. I cut the shaft this length, because this is my pattern. And I took the steel column, and I cut it back 2 inches. 2 inches shorter, that is. So now when I put my steering wheel down through my steering, I don't know how you call that, steering bar, whatever, down, my steering bar down through, this bearing up here, it's nice, but down the bottom it'll go all floppy. So what you do is you go to your measuring tape. There's only one thing in life that won't lie to you. That's a measuring tape. You might read it wrong, but it won't lie to you. You take that measuring tape and you measure down that. You know that's a 3/4 inch shaft, so you just go to your local lawnmower shop or whatever, small engine shop. Tell them you got a 3/4 inch shaft and you want the bearing to fit inside the column. You take that shaft, this column out, take out the steering wheel thing, the steering wheel out, take and pound that bearing in the bottom of the, you got the atmosphere going. You take the bottom, you take this shaft off, you take and hold it upside down, you pound the bearing in, and then when you put your steering shaft back down through, you got a perfect steering column. If you've ever bought I did it steering column or just a cheap steering column, that's all it is a bearing at the top and a bearing at the bottom with a quick release for your steering wheel. I want old, so I made my own. So it's just a matter of me finding the right bearing to pound in the bottom of that to hold that still in that column. That's just a measuring tape. I guess what I'm saying is, once you put your steering box in where you want it, just make a pattern. Like I usually make paper patterns to make my patches on the car or make something. Same thing with the steering column. Mock it up with something, tack it in place, and then you have all your measurements. And that's what I've done. I mean, more or less it's just common sense after that. I know I need a little room down there to put my my joint on. So I had to cut that steering column back some so I could get the joint on. You know, it has to be cut back a little bit. Other than that, now I'm just going forward. I'm going to case this in. I'm going to take this, I got this, like I said, I'm going to put that in, put my thumb up top where I want it cut off. So I don't want to cut off there. I'll snip that piece out. Once I cut this piece off, I'll weld it in there. Then what I'll do is I'll take a piece of paper and lay it on there and just mark it with my finger. And I'll know the pattern I need. I'll go get a piece of metal, 18 gauge. I always use 18 gauge for cars. I don't know why, but I just like the thickness of the metal. I know it's harder to work, but I just like the thickness better. I do. I've learned with it all my life, and that's what I use. You know, if you're going to do framework, obviously that's way different. But body work, panel work, I always use 18 gauge. You can imagine using 22 gauge or 20 gauge and then beating it and stretching it and how thin that metal would be. Wow. Yeah, so I'll just take a piece of paper, make a pattern of that, come in here and weld it down that round rod there, and weld it down that round rod there, scuff it off with a flapper wheel, and that piece will look awesome. I'll cut these off here a little bit, cut the nuts off a little bit. I'll leave this bottom of the muffler clamp, I'll take that right off, take the nut off, and then I can pull the steering column down. I can do whatever I want. If I ever want to take the steering column out, just a nut off there, a nut off there. Pull your joint off at your steering box, pull your steering column out. I'll leave this off. I was going to weld it onto the column, but that just gives it more reason not to fit sometimes. When I put the nuts on, I'll cut them up right close, then I'll wheel the nuts off. When I put the nuts back on, maybe I'll put a couple acorn nuts on it, so chrome or, you know what I mean, just to make it look good. I've seen all kinds of different ways how to do it, but the best way to do it is get your seat in place, mock it up with a 3/4 inch round rod, tack it to the dash, then you can cut all your measurements in the place that you need them. Piece of piss. If you've got no one holding you back while you're doing it, you got all the tools, you should be able to put that in a day. Not a problem. Not a problem. One day. Easy, easy, easy. That's how you put a steering column in the dash, in the roadster, I guess. That's what I'm doing. And you can do it any way you want to, but we all know if you make a pattern first, it'll go much easier.